Hey everybody, Josh Morgerman here, also known as Hurricane Man, also known as the Chaser Dude. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. And as I always say to the United Kingdom and folks in Europe, thanks for staying up late for me. It's great to be coming back to you guys with another action-packed episode of iCyclone Live. This is episode 2. You know, someone the other day asked me, they said, who's your show for? Who are you talking to? And it's interesting. I had to stop and think about that for a second, because the truth is you guys are a mixed bag. I was thinking about this. You know, my audience has always been kind of all over the place, like a real motley crew. So I wanted to take this second to say, you know, if you're a hardcore tropical weather nerd, if you're a fellow chaser dude or one in the making, if you're a resident of the Gulf Coast who just wants a leg up on the next hurricane threat, if you just like following weird dudes and getting thrills through their thrills, or if you're just bored out of your skull tonight and needing something to do, iCyclone Live is the place to be. So thank you. Welcome back. It's going to be a cool episode tonight, a good mix of stuff. I'm going to give you the inside scoop on my chasing plans, as well as the latest hurricane news and an outlook. And there will be the usual insightful analysis and brassy in-your-face opinions. And of course, history. You guys know I love history. It's one of the reasons I like living on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, because the towns here are so rich in history. And tonight, just tonight, I have a special treat, a drop-in visit from my very best buddy in the Chaser Dude scene. He'll be joining us a little later. But the most important thing is that in this format, in this live stream, is that you guys can ask questions. Anytime you want during the broadcast, you could just type it right there, and I'm going to get to as many of them as I can. And that's really important to me, because the whole point of this is the conversation. It's just that we can in real time talk. Now, before we jump in, I did want to sort of give a couple of quick shout outs. And the first I want to give to is to the Super Talk Mississippi Radio Network. Now, I'm streaming from their station in Gulfport, Mississippi. And a little trivia for you: Gulfport is the main city on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and actually the second biggest city in the state. Now, the reason I'm streaming here is because, well, the plan was I wanted to stream right from the front porch of Hurricane House. But the issue with that is that the internet in Hurricane House is not amazing. And I wanted to make sure to have a super sort of clean stream. So I'm doing it from right here in Gulfport, and that's going to give us a nice sharp picture and everything else. And secondly, I wanted to give a shout out to my very, very good friend, Ricky Matthews. Okay. I'm actually in his personal studio right now. Now, Ricky he was previously the publisher of the Biloxi Sun Herald, and these days he has his own radio show. It's called Coast View. And this show, it's really an awesome show. It's a great way to sort of stay up on what's happening in Mississippi. It celebrates life in coastal Mississippi. And for me, it's been a really good way to kind of just sort of get into the minds of folks here. And you can check it out. If you live anywhere between Slidell and Pensacola and up to Hattiesburg, you're actually in the listening area. So you could catch it on Super Talk Mississippi 103.1 FM on weekdays at 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. And if you're outside of the listening area, wipe your tears. You could still get the show. You can enjoy it on various streaming services and also on YouTube and Facebook. It's an awesome show. I've actually been on it a few times, and it's been a great way for me to really kind of participate in life in Mississippi, not just be a spectator on the sidelines. Ricky and his wife Ann have become very good friends of mine here, probably my closest friends in Mississippi, and it's been really cool working with Eric, being on Ricky's show. And also, I want to give a shout out to Deltec Homes. As you guys know, Deltec is the leader in designing and building hurricane resistant homes. As I mentioned to you, I work for them as a brand ambassador, and this show is brought to you in partnership with them. All right. So now that we have those things out of the way, I think let's just dive right in. Let's do a season update. So as you guys know, I called this episode The Return because I am now back in my headquarters, Hurricane House in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, right in the heart of the USA's hurricane country. And just right there, front row seat, waiting for the action. And so far, I thought I would start by sort of revisiting my chase theater, what I'm calling my chase theater, and how that's changed in the last month. So I showed you guys this map last episode, and I talked about the places I'm definitely chasing, which are the red ones, the places I might chase, which are the pink places, and the places where I'm definitely not going to chase, which are the white ones. And I would say the big change in the last month is that I'm feeling a little less optimistic about the pink places, the maybe places. The reason being the resurgence of the pandemic. A month ago, it seemed like the pandemic was just kind of, I don't know, disappearing. But it does seem like it's making a resurgence. And I think that a lot of these travel restrictions are going to remain in place. And so I'm not overly sort of optimistic about being able to go to these places like the Philippines and India, but we'll see. It could be another season where I'm focused 100% on North America. And if so, hey, that's cool. I'm just going to roll with it. So how's the season been so far? Well, it's been kind of active. No really high quality storms, but we've had a smattering of named storms. And there's the first four you can see, all the tropical storms. Now, last episode of iCyclone Live, Claudette had not formed yet. It was about to form. It was actually this mess in the Gulf during episode 1 of iCyclone Live. And I remember saying, it's not interesting to me, but it could have impacts. And it did have impacts. I think a lot of you on the middle Gulf Coast were surprised. It was kind of a mess of a system. It was not attractive, but it did get a name, Claudette. It produced some tremendous rainfall, produced tornado action, and there was some rain bands, especially in Alabama, that produced some really, really stormy conditions. So that thing kind of surprised a lot of people. And then came Elsa. This one made me angry. I'm going to be really honest. So here you can see this is the track of Elsa. This was a long tracker. It almost had like a Cape Verde system kind of vibe. Really too early in the season for that kind of a storm, but it definitely it had that kind of long track. And the colors: blue is tropical depression, green is tropical storm, and yellow is hurricane strength. And you could see it reached hurricane strength twice on its trek across the Northern Caribbean and the Eastern Gulf. Now, this one really tortured me for days. I tracked it, and wasn't sure what I was going to do about it. I was like, am I going to go after this? Am I not going to go after it? I couldn't decide. I finally got suckered into it. I'm really angry at myself. Yeah, so you could see that pink line there. That's the trek that I took across. I drove like a nut across. Well, no, I drove very safely. Let's be clear about that. But I drove in a very focused way without stopping across Mississippi, Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, and down into the Big Bend region, aiming for Cedar Key as Elsa, a hurricane by that point, was inching up just off the west coast of Florida. And this thing really faked me out. This is just to give you guys an idea of what this thing did. Okay, here's how it looked. This is how it looked kind of at its peak. It really started to come together. Look at that. You could see like a nice eye wall forming in that radar. I was getting kind of excited, just like, oh yeah, this is going to be a really interesting thing to chase. I'm really into this. And I'm driving. And then I pulled over to a gas station like 2 hours later, and I looked at it again on radar, and poof. It just like turned into scrambled eggs. I mean, look at that like pathetic thing. Let me be honest, I was very happy for the residents of Florida. Of course, this is what you want to happen. But man, as a chaser, I felt like a total sucker. I was like, okay, yeah, I got fooled by this thing. I got played. So it kind of disintegrated, but I was so close to Cedar Key. I was so close to my destination that I decided to just kind of go there for the night and sleep anyway, which I did. It did come ashore as a tropical storm. And here's what it looked like as it was coming in that morning, as the worst of it was hitting Cedar Key. So yeah, as far as tropical storms go, it was, it's pretty vigorous conditions. I mean, it was a healthy system, like much more so than I expected. But the bottom line, Elsa was a bust for me. It was my first bust in 5 years, and I define a bust as I leave the house to punch a hurricane core, and I don't. So it wasn't a bust in the sense that I missed the storm. I got into the right place for it, but the storm didn't show up. So yeah, for me, that's a bust. If I leave the house to punch a hurricane core and I don't, it's a bust. And literally, it was the first time in 5 years. So I was kind of annoyed about it. And that was like my first bust, not only in 5 years, but in 26 chases. And so that kind of hurt, to kind of lose that streak. But I'm cool with it for a few reasons. First of all, the bottom line is the reason it's a bust is because the intensity, the storm didn't show up in terms of the intensity. And as we know, there's very little skill in predicting hurricane intensity. And of course, there are always the folks sitting in their armchairs on Twitter who are like, well, I told you it was junk and it was never going to be anything. But the point is, we never know. I went and chased Hannah last year in the Gulf. That thing looked like junk and it became a decent hurricane. Isaias, that thing looked like junk and it became a decent hurricane. You just never know with these things. The hurricanes, the science of predicting track has gotten better and better. The science of predicting intensity, not so much. And this was one where, there was that just those 5 hours where it looked really hot and it sucked me in, but can't help it. Next thing I want to say is that I would rather bust than miss a cool event. What I mean is, it annoyed me driving all those hours to see a tropical storm, but worse than that. And the thing, and I know a lot of chaser dudes feel this, that feeling you get, oh my God, that emotional angst of you don't chase something and it becomes a really interesting or action-packed event. And you're just like, I mean, there's nothing more painful for that. I mean, I know a chaser who got literally physically sick from missing a big typhoon in the Philippines. He was so just upset about missing it. And I know it is literally a sick feeling. So I'd rather have this kind of bust than to just miss something cool. Third thing is, the trip ended up being valuable recon for me. Cedar Key was one of the few places on the Gulf Coast I hadn't been to. And I was like, okay, now I know Cedar Key and I have some ideas about it as a chase location for down the road. It was a good warm up for me. I hadn't chased in many months, and it's good to just get out on the road, dust the cobwebs off, get the equipment going, it just fresh batteries and everything. And so Elsa ended up being a good sort of, a good, like, let's say dress rehearsal. And I licensed some footage, so I covered the cost for the trip. So all in all, I would say, it's fine. And the final thing I want to say about it is, this is exactly why I live on the Gulf Coast now, or at least during the season, is because I could just go for everything. When I'm in LA, I can't be so impulsive. I have to kind of decide, okay, am I going to get on a plane for this? Am I going to buy a plane ticket and go through security lines and rent cars and do all that stuff? Here, I could just hop in the car and go after anything. And that's been my attitude about this since living here. So Elsa, I did what I was supposed to do. So bottom line is, it's fine. So what's coming up? Well, for right now, it's looking pretty dead at the moment. We had this smattering of early season activity. Now it's pretty boring. And when you look way out in the models, it continues to look boring, but it's what it is. Not going to overanalyze it too much. I will point out this is normal. July is actually typically not a busy time. Really, really climatologically, you expect that the meat of the season is basically 10th of August to 20th of October, the Atlantic. That's when you really expect the action. So it's normal right now. I'm thinking about it. Last year, today's July 29th, is it? Last year I'd only been on one chase by this point. So it feels like it's a slow start to the season, but it's not. One last thing I want to talk about in terms of the season is the rainfall on the Gulf Coast, which has been absolutely nuts. This is from like a week ago, but you could see the rainfall anomalies. The Gulf Coast has just been crazy. There's been this pocket of very heavy rain in southeast Louisiana, coastal Mississippi, and into Alabama. Just insane, way over 20 inches above normal, and some places 40 inches above normal. There's another zone down kind of the central Texas coast. And here's a zoomed in shot. I just took this from WLOX. I just like how they visualized it. This is just the Mississippi coast about a week ago, showing the rainfall totals. And you can see this is, again, just the Mississippi coast. And you could see Waveland, at that point, it was pushing 80 inches. It's now over 80 inches, but that's like about 40 inches above normal. So yeah, just insane rainfall. So why does this matter? Why am I talking about this? Like, how does this relate to hurricanes? Well, it does for a couple of reasons. One is the ground is super saturated right now on the Gulf Coast. So what that means is if we do get a hurricane or a tropical storm, or especially a big one or a slow moving one, we're in trouble because the ground is saturated. There's nowhere for all this water to go. So that's one thing. The second thing, and a lot of people have been talking about this, is trees are very vulnerable. When the ground gets this soggy, trees can blow over more easily. So if a hurricane does come, if this ground doesn't have time to dry up, we're going to lose a lot of trees. I actually worry about this one quite a bit because, you can't replace trees. And then the third point is that some scientists have suggested that there is sort of a correlation with major hurricanes on the Gulf Coast. A couple of folks who I follow on Twitter, one of them, Chris Bear at Storm Geo, has talked about the correlations between a very wet July on the Gulf Coast of the United States and then major hurricanes later in the season. Now, these are just some loose correlations. Of course, nothing is written in stone, but we have been hearing from other people about how it's going to be a busy year and all that. And this is another thing that gives us a hint that we could be in for some trouble later in the season on the Gulf Coast. One, I don't want to say superstition I have because I've never done like a statistical analysis of it, but one thing I've noticed is early in the season, you'll sometimes get what I call some foreshadow storms. You'll get some minor storms, either weak hurricanes or tropical storms that hit certain areas, and they seem to point to where systems might hit later in the season. And so far, we've had a few Gulf Coast impacts. They were just tropical storms, but it is the vibe that we're getting from this year so far. It's feeling kind of Gulfy again. Last year was it wasn't just that it was busy in the Atlantic, it was busy in the Gulf, and that had big impacts on the United States because anytime there's a hurricane in the Gulf, it's got to hit somewhere because it's trapped in there. And it's kind of feeling this year like it might be another kind of, like I said, a Gulfy kind of year. And if we do get one, there's going to be some problems because of all this rainfall we've had. All right, but that's all summertime speculation. In the meantime, except for my little Elsa chase, I've just been, enjoying life on the Mississippi coast. You guys know I've really taken a shine to it. I like living here. I enjoy the weather. This is from an electrical storm in the middle of the night. It wasn't raining, but we were just getting crazy lightning, and I was like taking pictures of it, which was really cool. I don't get weather in LA. When the rain finally departed, we were getting nice colors in the sky in Bay St. Louis and just brilliant moonlight at night along the waterfront. And here's just a shot. This is past Christiane on a day when it finally cleared up. I love those live oaks. They really, these trees are just, they're battle tough. These trees like this have survived so many hurricanes, and they just, look at them. You could almost see the way the branches are twisted. You could feel the sort of history of those storms. But it's turned out to be so far a nice summer on the Gulf of Mexico, now that the rain has been clearing out a little bit. And I enjoy the colors in the sky every day. It's been really awesome. And Hurricane Mom actually came down to the Deep South. It was her very first time in the Deep South. She came down from New York City. We spent a few days in coastal Mississippi, and then we hit New Orleans, and she had a very good time. She loved Mississippi. She liked Bay St. Louis. She was very into all the fresh seafood. That was the thing she kept talking about. And she liked Louisiana, and she's going to come back next year probably. So that's cool. All right. Quickly, I want to talk about Deltec Homes. As you guys know, and as I've talked about, I'm a brand ambassador for them. And I'm very excited about Deltec Homes because the idea of being able to live on the Gulf Coast and in a way where you just can have confidence that your house is going to survive these impacts is really cool. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Deltec Homes, they have this circular look. I just took this picture the other day. They're all over the Gulf Coast. This one is actually in Bay St. Louis. I was running along Beach Boulevard the other day, and there it is. And that's just an example. But this thing, notice it's round, and also notice that it's high off the ground. This thing is ready for anything. Or I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't make that claim, but it's built about as well as it can be. So what are Deltec Homes, in case you're not familiar? They're hurricane resistant houses, and more specifically, ones that withstand extremely high winds. And also they connect you to nature while protecting you. And that's really important. I talk about this a lot. You know, it's one thing, yeah, you can build a concrete and steel bunker, but who wants to live in that on the Gulf Coast? You want something open and airy. And that's what's cool about, that's the thing to me that most excites me about Deltec homes, is that they're open and airy and really strong, that you can kind of have both things at once. Now, folks have asked me, how do they withstand Category 5 winds? 3 reasons. 1 is the round shape. The wind blows around it. It's like more aerodynamic. 2 is the very high quality materials. And 3 is the precision engineering. Now, last time I walked you through this in detail. Today, I want to show you this cool video, which kind of, it just kind of shows you how these houses are constructed and how they work. All right, so that shows you how these things are constructed, and the result is withstanding Category 5 winds. And the I talked about this last time. The thing that made me decide to become a brand ambassador for Deltec was how they performed in Hurricane Dorian, a direct hit by the right front quad of the strongest hurricane in the history of North America. And these houses withstood that impact. That's one of them right there. You could see it's a little banged up, but it withstood 160 knot, 185 mile an hour winds. And here's this is one from Hurricane Michael in Mexico Beach. You can see everything is destroyed all around except the Deltec home. So yeah, these things are really, I'm blown away by them, no pun intended. And I'm very proud to be representing this brand. All right, so good transition from one Category 5 American hurricane to another. In this part of the show, you guys know I like history. I want to take a look back at Hurricane CAMILLE. Okay, this is one of the most important hurricanes in American history, and I thought I would delve into it today. It's also a very important hurricane in Mississippi history, and it's one that folks continue to talk about. And I would say that I don't want to say there's controversy around it, but there's disagreements about what happened exactly, and I'm going to examine those now. So the essentials: CAMILLE was in August of 1969. Peak intensity was Category 5, 175 mile an hour winds. It brushed the southeast part of Louisiana and then rammed into Mississippi as a full-on Category 5, or that's how it was assessed. And it had a major U.S. impact. Actually, at the time, it was one of the first hurricanes in the U.S. I don't think it was the first, but one of the first to do over $1 billion damage in the sort of the dollars of the day. So like I said, it was one of the great hurricanes of America American history. Here's the track. You could see it formed in the Caribbean. It brushed the western tip of Cuba as a Category 2. Then it went into the Gulf, pulled a nutty, became a Category 5, and then it weakened slightly during an Iowa replacement cycle, and then boom, rammed into Mississippi. And here's a close-up shot of the track into Mississippi. It hit the western Mississippi coast. That landfall point is actually Waveland, which is the town next to Bay St. Louis. And here's a satellite shot, a visible shot from the afternoon before it hit Mississippi. It hit Mississippi late at night. And you could just see, unfortunately, we don't have the beautiful kind of satellite porn from back then that we do today, these like high resolution images, but you could just see a pinhole eye there, which is kind of interesting. All right. So Camille has sort of mythical significance for folks who like my age, like who grew up as like sort of tropical weather nerds in the 80s. So here's the aftermath of Camille. This is downtown past Christiane. This town was in the right eye wall of the hurricane, and you could see downtown is just flattened. It's just a pile of rubble. And these are the famous Richelieu apartments. You could see this is the before picture of how it looked before the hurricane. And this is how it looked afterward. That's a big old apartment building, and the whole thing is just gone. Now there's a lot of urban legends about what happened in that building. There's a myth that everyone died except one person. That's not what happened. But two things that did happen for sure is one, the whole building got demolished, and two, a lot of people died in it. So back to its sort of reputation. So when I was a 15-year-old weather nerd, that was before Andrew. It was before Katrina. It was before Michael. So Camille was like it was the great American hurricane. This was the one that we all sort of talked about. Okay. It was a Category 5. There was the Labor Day hurricane in Florida, but that just hit a couple of offshore islands, whereas Camille rammed into a very populated coastline. So it's a topic of really great interest. So we want to understand what happened exactly. So exactly how strong was it at landfall? So the traditional estimate was 909 millibars and 165 knots or 190 miles an hour. But that was based on very scant data and old methodologies. So in 2016, a group of scientists took another look at Camille, and it was a great team, a researcher named Margie Keeper, and then two guys from the National Hurricane Center, Chris Lancy and Jack Bevan, who's one of the senior specialists at the Hurricane Center. And they went back over the data, and they applied modern methodologies, and they published a paper describing what, their kind of reassessment of the storm. So there's very little data from the inner core of Camille at landfall, and the landfall intensity estimate relies very heavily on one single reading from a house in Bay St. Louis that went through the eye. So this dude here, you could see him, his name is Charles Breath, and that's the barometer. Here, I'll make it bigger so you could see. He's holding the barometer that he used in this house in Camille's eye to measure 904 millibars. Okay. Now this reading was vetted. This guy, just by the way, he wasn't some random hobbyist. He was a mariner and boat dealer. He was a lifelong, apparently a really hardcore weather nerd, from what I can gather. So he was someone who was used to looking at barometers and knew how to read them. He took hourly readings during the hurricane. And then afterwards, some dudes from the Weather Bureau office in New Orleans came, and they took the barometer. He gave it to them. They took it back to the office, and they sort of checked it for accuracy and everything else. And they found the instrument to be accurate. And keep in mind, his house was almost at sea level because Bay St. Louis is very close to sea level, so there aren't any elevation issues, but they deemed the reading to be accurate. And so that is the basis for the kind of reanalysis of Camille. So based on I took the paper by Keeper, Lancy, and Bevan, and it has a bunch of sort of metrics and figures in it. And with that, I created a landfall diagram showing various wind radii. And you can see this is approximate. Of course, a hurricane is not so perfectly geometric as what you're seeing here, but based on radar, and I did some analysis of radar, and also just I took various figures and numbers from the reanalysis, and also I did some additional research, and I was able to derive these kind of dimensions. And by the way, I ran this diagram by Jack Bevan, and he was basically cool with it, with the caveat that these wind radii are all very rough, meaning we don't have the data to know how exact they are. But you could see, here's the eye, and you could see the landfall point was very near Waveland. Base St. Louis was in the eye. That 904 millibars was measured in the eye as well, near the eastern edge of it. This is the inner eye wall. Okay, this thing had concentric eye walls. This is the inner eye wall, and you can see that the radius of maximum winds in that eye wall basically passed right over the town of Pass Christian. So they got the absolute worst of it. They did not get in the eye, but they got probably the highest winds. And that inner eye wall extended almost to Long Beach. And then there was an outer eye wall that raked Gulfport and Biloxi, and I'll talk about that more in a second. And like I said, I want to emphasize that this is sort of a this is an approximate diagram, and there are error bars with all of these radii, all these estimates. Okay, so this is bear with me, this is the only super duper, like extremely nerdy slide in the whole presentation, but here's how they got the 150 knots, the 175 miles an hour, which became their assessment for the landfall intensity. So they took that 904 millibars, and they said, all right, if the 904 millibars is at the edge of the eye, that means that the center of the eye, the pressure is probably a little lower. So based on the 904 millibars at the edge of the eye, they analyzed that the actual central pressure of the center of the eye was probably 900 millibars. And then they use what's called the Brown equation, an equation developed by Brown and his co-authors for estimating winds based on a few factors: the central pressure, the latitude of the hurricane, and the intensity trend, whether it's weakening or strengthening, or if it's steady state. Okay. 900 millibars for a steady state system would be 148 knots. If it's strengthening, it would be 155 knots. And then from there, you take that output and then you penalize or add bonuses based on other factors. So for example, with Camille, one thing that made them think, okay, maybe the winds weren't that high, was that the environmental pressures around the hurricane were very low. On the other hand, it had a very small radius of maximum winds, or on the small side. And also it was moving kind of fast, 15 knots, which is something that would make you sort of add to the estimate. So when you take into account these sort of like factors that kind of contradict each other a little bit, they ended up with the estimate, the landfall intensity estimate of 150 knots, or 175 miles an hour is the official landfall intensity of Hurricane Camille in Mississippi. So where does that put Camille in terms of American hurricanes? It puts it all the way up here at number 2, the second strongest hurricane on record to strike the United States, below the Labor Day hurricane in Florida, but above Hurricane Andrew in Florida, and above Hurricane Michael. Okay, now how do folks feel about that? Interestingly, not everyone is cool with this verdict. Okay, there are some of the survivors were angered that the intensity estimate was lowered. It was always considered 190. Now it's 175. Folks who went through this cataclysm firsthand and can't imagine anything worse feel that that this doesn't do justice to what happened. And then others, especially some chasers I've talked to, feel that the estimate is too generous. And this is really interesting. The feeling of the skeptics is when they look at the aftermath photos from the area that probably had the maximum winds, that being the Pass Christian area, Bay St. Louis, Pass Christian, maybe Long Beach. That was where those highest winds were, the right eye wall. Folks say that the wind damage does not look like Category 5 wind damage, that there are pictures of tremendous destruction. I mean, like really, incredible destruction, but that most of it seems to be from the storm surge and not from the winds. And if you look at the pictures of the trees and the houses, it doesn't look like 175 mile an hour winds happen. That is their argument about it. So there are definitely some sort of some contradictory thoughts about it. So my feeling about it, I've thought about this a lot about Camille. I see where the skeptics are coming from. I agree. When I look at the damage pictures of Camille, I have not found any pictures of wind damage that's definitely wind damage, and only wind damage that like knocked my socks off. Now, in a lot of situations, it's hard to tell because wind and water damage, it just becomes like one big mess. But I see what they're saying. That said, there's a few points I want to make to sort of counter that. One is it's a very flawed methodology to use pictures to prove that winds did not happen. You could use pictures to prove that winds did happen. You can show, okay, here's evidence of very strong winds. This building is collapsed. But you can't use pictures to say, okay, winds didn't happen, because there's always a chance that the area with the absolute highest winds, which could have been a very small area, maybe wasn't photographed. So that's one point I want to make. It's like it's not like every single square inch of the Gulf Coast is photographed after Camille. So it could be that the evidence escapes. Another thing I'm going to say is that old houses, a lot of those old houses that you see in the Camille pictures, those houses were built like tanks. Hurricane House is an example. The little cottage that I rent, you guys see pictures of it. It looks like this flimsy little cottage. It's not. That thing is a tank. That thing went through Camille. That thing went through Katrina. That thing went through Zeta. It has almost never has any damage. It's a century-old house, and that thing is rock solid. And I think that sometimes people look at the pictures of the old houses and they expect them to perform the way kind of some of the newer houses do. When you look at a lot of the damage pictures from Andrew and from Charlie, for example, a lot of those houses that they tore up were very poorly built modern houses that were just kind of made just really not well constructed, not Deltec homes. So that's another thing is you really, if you're going to start judging wind damage, you need a qualified engineer to do that. Someone like a Tim Marshall, who actually is qualified to look at structures and understand, okay, did those winds happen or not? Third thing I want to say is that the trees in this region are all extremely wind resistant. Those live oaks that I talked about before, the pines that are all around coastal Mississippi, and also those palms, those are the sturdiest trees on the planet. One of my followers on Twitter, he said live oaks, that they would survive an atomic bomb blast. And he's right, man. Those things are insane. I mean, those things, they just don't go down. It's why they're all twisted looking. They show the scars of all of what they've been through. But I find it kind of really interesting. You can't really totally know that certain winds didn't happen because those trees are still up. Next thing I want to say is that the storm surge of Camille was over 24 feet in Pass Christian. It was a small hurricane and it was fast moving, unlike Katrina, which was a very big hurricane and moving slower. Camille was pretty small and it moved pretty fast. For it to produce a storm surge that high, the second highest in American history, or like I think it is after Katrina, it had to be really, 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 really strong. Third thing is that just that combination, 900 millibars of a strengthening system, it was re-strengthening as it was coming in, with a small RMW is like our radius of maximum winds is almost definitely a Cat 5. And finally, the core gradient was pretty steep. So here's a close-up of the landfall zone. So they had this 904 millibar pressure from the Mr. Breath. Okay. They also had another reading of 919 millibars from the inner eye wall in Pass Christian. So we have two readings at about the same time. They're about 3 miles apart. The change is 15 millibars per nautical mile. Okay, so 15 millibars per nautical mile. Part of that is in the eye, so you have to assume, okay, the gradient in this part would only be about, like, once you get in the eye, the gradient flattens out. So maybe this is a millibar or two. Bottom line is the gradient across between these 2 points would not be even. So you have to assume that probably the maximum was around 7 or 8 millibars per nautical mile. How does that compare to other hurricanes? Well, these are the gradients that I've measured in various hurricanes, and you could see 7 or 8 puts it around Michael or Maria, like a low-end category 5, high-end category 4. So to me, that gradient puts it in the ballpark of a decent Cat 5. So bottom line is, my personal feeling weighing in on this topic, this controversy, whatever, is I'm cool with the Hurricane Center's reanalysis and their verdict on Camille. I'll say that I agree with it. I think they came to the right verdict on it. I don't know if I would say exactly 150 knots, but there you go. One last thing I want to say about Camille. Folks often talk about how tiny it was. You read a lot of the literature that it was a tiny hurricane. It was on the small side. I don't think it was not a tiny hurricane. It wasn't a microcane. So for example, when I was in Patricia in Mexico, that thing was a microcane. That thing was basically like a big tropical storm with like one little tornado inside of it. And if that tornado hit you, it was really scary, but otherwise it didn't have a lot of impact. The sort of the extreme conditions were restricted to a very, very, very small area close to the center. That was really not the case with Camille. And the evidence is what happened in Gulfport and Biloxi. Biloxi is almost 30 miles from the center, and Biloxi was devastated. You look at pictures of Biloxi after Camille, and it's like whole blocks of the city are just wiped out by storm surge and wind. So it was not that tiny. And again, going back to the diagram, it was a concentric eye wall kind of hurricane. So the inner eye wall pounded Waveland, Bay St. Louis, past Christiane, and a little bit of Long Beach. But the outer eye wall really is what got Gulfport and Biloxi. And this is one of the radar shots I used to kind of come up with these sort of radii. See, I put this here for the inner eye wall, and I put this line for the outer eye wall. And what helped me decide that was radar shots like this. So of course, these are coarse old radar shots, but this one is from landfall, and you could see the eye just over the west end of St. Louis Bay. And you can see there's a few lines that give you an idea of the contours of the dimensions of the hurricane. This seems to be the outline of the inner eye wall. This seems to be the outline of the outer eye wall extending to just about Biloxi Bay. It was pictures like that helped me sort of determine the structure. And it reminded me a lot of Hurricane Maria as it hit Puerto Rico. This is the final radar shot of Hurricane Maria as it hit Puerto Rico before the radar dome went down. But you could see actually this had that kind of double eye wall structure as well. You could see there's that little inner ring, and then there's this big outer ring. And Maria was an example of how that outer eye wall, man, that thing was no joke. The winds in the outer eye wall looked to me as strong as the inner eye wall. I mean, that outer eye wall was very, very destructive. And so I think Camille was a kind of a smaller version of this. Final note I want to say, this is the home of the Breath family. This is where the 904 millibars was measured in this house. And you could see it was very heavily damaged from wind and storm surge, but it did survive. And here's how the house looked after it was all fixed up. This is from the early 2000s. You can see that's a gorgeous old home. That's like a lot of the homes in Mississippi, in Bay St. Louis and past Christiane, just a gorgeous old home. Well, I'm very sorry to say that it survived Camille, but it did not survive Katrina. This is that property after Katrina. The house was just gone. And not only that, but that barometer, that historic barometer that measured that 904 millibars was also lost in this storm. And just yesterday, I biked over to the property. It's like only about a mile from Hurricane House, and this is what it looks like today. It's just a green field, but the family sign is still there, which is really cool. I think that's awesome. And this is the sign after the hurricane. They had a sense of humor. They put these words on it. We're still, the breath still breathe here, thank God. But that's cool. The town kept that sign here, which is just which is awesome. But yeah, that's really tragic. I'm someone who, obviously I'm really into hurricanes. I find them very fascinating, but I love history. And, there's no better keeper of our history than these beautiful old houses, and to see them just destroyed like that is really, it's absolutely heartbreaking. All righty. Well, I don't want to end on such a gloomy note before we go into our next segment, which is something that I'm very excited about. And this is the Chaser Dude drop-in. Okay, so this is I told you this isn't a talk show. I'm not trying to make it a talk show, but I said that I would occasionally have people on who I think are cool enough to come into the Chaser Dude orbit and have a discussion. And today I'm very excited to invite or to have on James Reynolds. Okay, so just in case you're not familiar with his work, I kind of made this screen it's sort of like a baseball card. It's like a little fact sheet on my buddy James. He's British. He lives in Tokyo. That's his home base, partly because his wife is Japanese, and also because he's a typhoon dude. His specialty is cyclones, tropical cyclones, specifically typhoons. I always describe him as the king of the Western Pacific. That is his turf, but he also does other stuff too. You guys know me. I'm an extremely, I have a very narrow specialty. I only chase tropical cyclones, nothing else. I'm really weird about that. James is a little more versatile. He's into like geological events. He goes after volcanoes. He shoots all kinds of really interesting natural phenomenon. like me, his range is global. James is one of the few guys who's just chasing stuff all over the world, you know, like every hemisphere, like I am. And his big talent is videography. Now, you guys know me. I'm not a videographer, you know, I'm just like I shoot cool video, but my big thing is going in and collecting data. James's is he's a videographer. He's always got the latest equipment, and he, you know, if you look at his videos on YouTube, his YouTube channel is Earth Uncut TV. But if you look at his work, it's beautiful shots. Even in crazy conditions, he manages to get beautiful shots. He does a really good job with it. And so I think of him as like just one of the best videographers for this, for kind of like, you know, raging nature on the planet. And he just launched a new vlog series, which I'm really excited about. It's called Frontline Nature. So check it out. Go on his YouTube channel. And yeah. And one last thing I'm going to say before I bring him on is I consider his greatest work is the work he did in Super Typhoon Haiyan. As you guys know, that was a Category 5 that flattened a city in the Philippines. James and I and another dude, Mark, were in that storm. That became a worldwide story, and I feel that the James's images and videos from that were I think what that was basically the world's window into it. I took some video too, so did some other people, but I felt like James' work is what really defined that. He took a lot of video. This is video he got of me in the middle of the storm, rescuing people from storm surge. So with that big introduction, I'm gonna bring James on, and here we go.
Hey Josh, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah. What time is it there? You're like in Tokyo. What time is it?
It's just coming up to 10 o'clock in the morning.
So, all right, well,
time to be on.
Sorry, I was yapping. Well, I gave you a little extra time. Sorry, I was like yapping so much, but this is awesome. So I should tell viewers, you know, we James and I talk like every day, like via Twitter, but you know, like Twitter instant messaging. But you know, we're buddies and we talk a lot. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of just bring our conversation out in the open. Well, not all of it. I mean, the nice parts.
No, it's great to be with you, and I just want to say a big congratulations on this new live stream. It's a really cool thing you've got going here, and it's very cool.
Thanks, man. Thanks. So you were just chasing. So you just got back from a chase. Why don't you have a Typhoon Infa?
Yeah, just blowing the cobwebs away, and 2021 chase season has got off to a start here. Obviously, because the pandemic's going on. Like you, I'm very much kind of restricted to a certain geographic area. So for me, this year, it's only Japan is my chase turf. But that's a big area that stretches all the way basically from Taiwan to where I am now in Tokyo. So thankfully, I got a big area to work with. And yeah, last week, it was this big lumbering Muppet cane, which is how you like to refer to them, spun up and went through the southern Japanese islands. And yeah, I hit the road and just managed to scrape into the eye wall. It wasn't a very strong storm.
Yeah, but you got right in it. And yeah, so let's talk about that. So okay, so there's something that you and I have we really disagree about. So I really, like, I've talked about this a lot. Like, I hate island roulette. I hate it. Like, I hate chasing on islands. Now, I've had success island chasing. You know, some of my greatest chases were on islands, but I hate it, man. When I go out to penetrate a hurricane core, I want to be in Texas and like Louisiana, Mississippi, where I could just drive and just get right into it. I hate this island stuff, but you've told me that you like it. So are you a masochist? What is it?
Look,
explain yourself.
I tell you what, when an island chase comes off, when you have that plan and you execute it perfectly, and you know the feeling when you are on basically a tiny speck of land in the middle of essentially the largest ocean on the planet, and the eye of this typhoon comes right over you. I don't know if there's any greater feeling than that. You know, there's a lot of luck, but there's also some skill that goes into it as well. And just the nature of being on an island, you're just so exposed to the wind coming off the ocean. There's no land interaction effect, so you can get really good pressure readings, and the winds are strong. So the rewards are huge. But
that's a great way. That's a great way of putting it, though. You're right. The rewards, when you hit the jackpot, man, you hit it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you saw that with Dorian, obviously a tragic storm and everything. But just to be in that location you were in on a tiny little island, right in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the storm. It's just, there's no better place to be. But yeah, it's stressful. There's nothing worse than running out of land. The storm's 50 miles that way and all you got is the beach. It's frustrating. Because there's nothing you can do about it, So it's island chasing, I always say, is about making the best decision you can with the amount of data you have at the time where you have to make that call. And that's all we can really do.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that maybe I think you have a better attitude about it than I, because it sounds like you're kind of zen about it. You do what you can to make a good choice. And then you're just like, leave it into the hands of the weather gods, and I'm just like, I just get pissy and angry about it.
Yeah. I'm slightly kidding myself. Look, before I go on an island chase, I'm like, right, I'm going to be in the Ryukyu Islands. That's what the island chain of, Okinawa is called. They are beautiful. I love visiting them. The food is great. The people are great. The beaches are stunning. And I'm always like, this is a great place to be anyway. Just be zen about it. There's going to be some interesting stuff going on and have a good time. But man, the stress still kicks in, and I'm still tearing my hair out and dreading it half the time. So I do try and kid myself. But look, I always have fond memories of these trips, even when they go wrong. It's like, I don't think there's a single island chase where I would say, no, I wouldn't have done that. Even the ones.
Oh wow, wow. Yeah. Wow, you have a really good attitude. I need to learn some of these skills. You just said something which really resonated for me. You talked about your feelings about the Ryukyu Islands. I realized, like, for me, Mississippi, the Mississippi coast has become sort of my happy place. It's become like my, Mississippi is like my spiritual home as a chaser dude. I'm just like right there in the heart of the action, right on the Gulf Coast in a town with so much cool hurricane history. And it literally is, it's like my happy place, and the way you were talking about the Ryukyu Islands just now kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Are the Ryukyu Islands, as a chaser dude, your happy place?
Yeah, I would say the Ryukyu Islands, the east coast of Taiwan, you just got that stretch of the Western Pacific, which is just jaw-droppingly beautiful. The sea is the most turquoise blue that you can imagine. And I should say this because this is really important, the infrastructure of these islands and this specific location in the Western Pacific makes chasing storms a lot easier than elsewhere in the world.
Oh man, totally.
These places are built like a fortress. The power usually stays on. The shops are all open during the storm, so it just makes it a little easier as well.
Oh yeah,
I always appreciate, because this is a hard business we're in. It's a lot of the times it's an extremely hard grind. So Taiwan and the Ryukyu Islands, you always know it's not necessarily going to be an uncomfortable experience.
Yeah, no, you brought up a really good point about the infrastructure in Taiwan and the Ryukyu Islands, and that's something that always impressed me is just how the power stays on, and also you can get a direct hit by a really intense typhoon, like something like a category 4 on our scale. And you'll come out afterward and you'll see like the cars are like thrown all over the place like toys, because Japanese cars are a little small, but the buildings, like you'll be like a broken window, maybe a crooked sign, but it's like, man, like they build stuff real serious down there.
Yeah, they have to. And it's just a purely economic thing. That stretch of ocean from Okinawa to Taiwan, every recurving typhoon basically passes through that area. And some of them are full strength, category 5s are possible there and have occurred pretty regularly. Once every 3 or 4 years, you'll get a Cat 5 rolling through that area. So they have to just be built for them. They got no choice. You can't just rebuild, every time a major typhoon hits. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, that's just a really interesting thing. And obviously the typhoons are so, ingrained in like the local culture there, much like by the sounds of things in Mississippi as well. It's hurricane country. Well, this is typhoon country, and they're part of people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I like about living in Mississippi is every person you meet and talk to, especially if they're, they have some years, they all have these like incredible stories to share about, about the hurricanes they've been through. And they have all these insights and this like local wisdom, which is really cool. Part of the history is in the buildings and the trees, and part of it is just in people's minds and their hearts. And it's really cool. How's your Japanese? Are you, like, I mean, I know you take lessons and stuff. Like, are you able to?
It's hard. It's a hard language. It's up there with, I think when you see the language charts of difficulty to learn it, it's up in the top bracket of hardest. But so I can get by on the road now. Actually in 2019, so 2 years ago, I was chasing Super Typhoon Lekima actually on Ishigaki. And, that storm actually turned out to be a bust. It pulled this mad wobble.
I remember that with the little tiny ring.
Oh, it was crazy vicious storm, but good news for the island, it just missed.
It looked really cool on the radar. Yeah.
Well, I think that was one of the greatest uses of my Japanese so far, where I managed to kind of use my language to sweet talk this caretaker dude into letting me have this whole school to myself to film the typhoon from. He was like, "Oh yeah, you're typhoon guys, cool. Here you go. Here's the key." And
you did that in Japanese?
Key under the doormat. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm like totally impressed.
So yeah, it's I can manage to kind of convey what I'm up to the locals, which helps a lot, because you see some random white guy turning up in a typhoon, that can make people scratch their heads sometimes.
Yeah. Now, Pam in South Carolina. Pam, nice to hear from you. Pam's a very loyal follower of both of us, actually. She wants to know how we met. So how was it? I think we were aware of each other's work and started corresponding. I think we were like on social media, basically.
Yeah, I think it was back in 2012, if I remember right.
I think you're right.
Yeah, just as I'm losing track of social media when I started Twitter and stuff, but I think that's when we started chatting, talking about typhoons and hurricanes and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the next year we started chasing together in 2013.
Yeah, no, actually, and to sort of give folks a little background. So my whole chase career, most of it, I've just been a total solo act, and I never planned to chase in the Western Pacific. It didn't interest me. It looked hard to me. And the reason I started taking an interest in it was because, if you guys remember, we're in a busy phase with hurricanes in the United States and in North America right now, especially since 2016, it's just been nuts. But in the early 2010s and the early teens, there was just not, I mean, the Atlantic was dead and the US was not getting any hurricanes. And I just was desperate for action. So I took an interest, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go chasing the Western Pacific. And James, you invited me to join you on a chase, and I was going to chase it. I was going to fly out to Japan to chase Typhoon Fitao. And you said, hey, join me and Mark if you want. And the three of us chased that together. And I remember I lost my typhoon virginity. It was like a triple score, 3 in a week, you and me hunting them down.
That was a crazy week, and one where there's not many places or opportunities to get to knock off 3 hurricane strength systems in the space of a week. And that, it always blows me away when the Westpac just goes into click mode, and when it just spits out. And 2013 was a crazy year. 2016 was a crazy year. But the last decade or so in the Westpac has been, I think we're going through a slow phase right now. It's just my kind of anecdotal observation. The slower, quieter years certainly outnumber those crazy busy years. 2013 was exceptional.
Yeah. No, I remember you and I, we did Fitao. It was a category 2 on Miyako-jima in Japan. Then we got category 4 Danas on the northern tip of Okinawa. And then you and I then went on to the Philippines to get Nari, a category 3 in the Philippines. Yeah, man, that was all in a week. It was like magical. It was like, as a chaser dude, it was one of those times in my life where I'm like, wow, everything's clicking, everything's working, just like ace after ace, man, like can't do anything wrong.
Yeah, it was that was a wild year. And then of course the finale was the tragic events in Tacloban and Haiyan, or Yolanda as our Filipino friends refer to it. And by that point I was just like, I'm done with this year. Let's just finish things off. It's crazy end.
Yeah. And just for folks who aren't familiar, James is talking about Super Typhoon Haiyan, which was a month after we had that week-long triple score. About a month later, a Category 5 just made a direct hit on a big city in the Philippines. James and I were there with another fellow, Mark, and the city was just whole portions of the city were just wiped out, thousands dead within an hour. Our hotel, which was at one of the highest points of the city, went underwater, and we were jumping in trying to drag people out of the storm surge. James caught this action on video, and it really just really recorded the kind of how desperate things were in our hotel. I was very proud that we got everyone upstairs. No one in our hotel died. Thousands of deaths all around the building and the city, and yet we managed to save, thank God, everyone in the hotel, everyone we got upstairs. It was miraculous. I want to mention to folks, James and I got through the experience uninjured somehow. I mean, I was in that dark, disgusting water pulling people out. I didn't have a scratch on me, but our friend Mark, who was also rescuing people, there was debris under the water. His leg hit something, and his leg was torn open. And I don't mean like a little cut. I mean torn open. And we were stuck there for a few days. And by the time Mark got back to Taiwan, where he lives, he was about a day from losing his leg. The doctors told him if it was another day, they would have had to amputate. He's better now, but man, the stakes were high in that one.
Yeah, it's one of those experiences, and I think every chase I go on, or certainly beforehand, that events during Haiyan always crop up in the back of your mind about just the stakes as guys who chase. What if it goes wrong? The consequences are real and severe, and that's always at the back of my mind. I'm sure a lot of people looking at what we do on Twitter and the posts we put up and the videos and pictures, I don't know if it makes it look easy at all, or we're somehow immune from getting hurt or injured or anything. But when we're on the ground in these crazy eye walls, and especially a long way from home and overseas or whatever, if things go wrong, the consequences are real. And that was a real wake up call for me. What happened in Haiyan is with Mark. And
yeah, no, it definitely, like Haiyan, I just felt like, wow, it got real. Like I'd never seen dead bodies before and stuff like that. And I remember after that chase, I was done for a while. I was like, I don't want to chase for a while. Like I don't want to think about typhoons. I don't want to get on the road. I just don't want to do this anymore. I mean, of course, whatever it is came back because I was born with it. I got to keep chasing. But that one really rattled me.
Yeah, it's the whole psychology of chasing these storms. We talk about this a lot privately, and almost like it's some kind of narcotic. We chase. What's the sound? I'm not going to speak for you, but certainly with me, there's a lot of chasing going on, and I'm not enjoying myself. I'm like, why am I doing this? I miss my kids. I want to be home with them. I don't want to be here. Get in the storm, get in the zone, do the work. The storm goes away, and then I'm looking at the models, going, right, when's the next storm? I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'd love to hear a psychologist's analysis of all this, because it certainly makes me curious and a little bit puzzled.
I think you described it really well. And yes, you're bringing our private conversations out into the open. And I'm glad. I actually was hoping, because I think that the stuff that you and I talk about is two of the top dudes in the world who chase globally. And really, we don't chase casually. We're hardcore. It's a grind. It's storm after storm. It's not like a hobby for either of us. This is like our life. And there's absolutely, I mean, it's nice to talk about it with someone else, that there's a psychological toll to it. And I think you described it really well, that it is like a drug, in good ways and bad ways. And I have that too of, sometimes when I'm going out on the road, I'm dreading it. I'm just like, I'm not, I don't know what it is. Like you, I've got my life, especially in LA, just, I'm the exact opposite. Like what I hunt hurricanes, I'm an animal. But, I'm just like a hunting dog. But the rest of my life, I'm kind of like, I just like my quiet life. I like do my fitness activities and eat healthy. Like I like my routines. I'm kind of like a pussycat outside of hurricane chasing. And it's like, I don't always want to be the hunting wolf. And there's that dread sometimes. But interesting, like, you go on the journey, you get the rush and like the drug-like experience. And then very next day, looking at those damn models for the
Yeah.
next fix. It's like there's something twisted about it.
And look, I just want to make this very clear. When I bring up things like this, I'm absolutely never looking for sympathy from anyone, because no, not at all. Well, I just bring that up because I think it's for people who might be interested in what it's like as a chaser, purely from a storm chaser's perspective of tackling these storms and what that experience is like.
Great point.
People having a very bad day when a storm is hitting, they are the most important people, who people should be concerned about, praying for, caring about, that, not us. But I just bring it up because I do think, some people might be interested in just the storm chaser perspective on
exactly. And I'm glad that you said that. And I always say this. I say, yeah, we deserve absolutely no sympathy. And I've said to my business partners many times, if I die in a hurricane or a typhoon, when you give the eulogy, say he deserved what he got, because like, don't ever feel sorry for me. It is like I'm the last person to deserve pity of any kind.
For sure.
But like you said, though, I think you brought up an important point, James, which is that there are young guys who watch us and who want to do what we do, and I think it's good for us to talk about, okay, this is the lifestyle. This is part of it, is burnout. It's just like it's professional. It's like professional athletes. You talk about tennis players who play too many tournaments. There is burnout, and it's like a real thing. Like, how do you deal with it? Like, for me, I found, I'm kind of like a fitness dude, and I find, like, in between storms, staying on a really hardcore fitness regimen, getting a lot of sleep. And people think I don't sleep. I do sleep. I just have, like, I basically, I'm a very nocturnal creature. So I get my sleep in, but I usually don't. I go to bed kind of around dawn, and I get up like early in the afternoon. But those are the things that I do, is just sleep and exercise to kind of recharge, refocus, recenter my brain, so I'm ready for the next battle. What are your things? Your kind of centering activities?
That's a great question. And I think my career has very much been split into two so far. The first half is chasing before I had kids. And then the second half is very much chasing after I had kids. And there's definitely been a marked kind of way I need to, I've changed the way I kind of approach this whole thing. And number one for me is, I know I can chase successfully if I know that everything back home is good. So I just, if my chasing is becoming a burden on my family, then that makes me feel really uncomfortable and makes it a lot harder. So yeah, just preparing for a chase, I just want to make sure everything's cool back home, give the kids and my wife, who is my rock. I couldn't do this without the support of Yoki, my wife. She's been with me right since the beginning, right since our first date. I left early to go chase a typhoon in Vietnam. So that's she's
been in on this experience from the start.
From the day one.
Yoki, dude, Yoki's a treasure. Okay, so like, although I'm a solo act, I do chase. There's a few dudes I chase with on occasion, like they're longtime chase partners, and I had to, the spouse is always, there's always that issue, the spouse, and the negotiation and all that. And I had to say, man, out of all of them, Yoki is on a class of her own, like in terms of how tolerant she is.
Yeah, I'm lucky, but she knows how much this means to me. And, this is part of us, you're a chaser, dude. It's in your DNA. That's what we live for. But yeah, she's amazing. So look, if I can hit the road and know that the kids are cool, everything's going to be all right at home, then I can just focus on what I need to focus on and get the job done. And that helps a lot. But man, the night before a storm hits, when you're tired and just, I miss my kids. It's tough. It's tough.
So honest questions. Let's talk about this. Like, one of the reasons I'm unmarried is it's by choice, because I'm just, I'm kind of like a lone wolf kind of dude. And I realized like a spouse would not fit into this picture for me. You found someone who manages, who accepts you for what you are, and it knows you're a hunter, but have there been points where your chasing has interfered with your life? Like, I mean, mine has in other ways. I feel like I've at points let down friends or family because I I selfishly went on a chase. Like, have you ever had experiences like that where you felt like you didn't do the right thing? You put chasing first when you shouldn't have?
Yeah, there's that. There's a reason why we scheduled our wedding in like November. It also happened to be a really nice time of year in Hong Kong. It's not too hot, but there aren't many tropical cyclones in November. But Yoki was cool with that. It worked out. But yeah, there have been cancelled holidays. There have been birthdays missed. Christmases almost messed around and arguments had. It's when you do something unusual like we do, which does drag us away overseas for multiple times a year with regularity, their issues have cropped up. But I got much better at figuring that out myself. And now, especially since there's so much, this is my career, this is how I make a living and put food on the table, and I've got grand ambitions now. They're in a really good place in regards to plans going forward, especially over the next few years. I feel like things are good at home.
Good.
And I'm energized. And once this damn pandemic is over, oh man, I'm gonna hit the road hard.
Yeah.
Make up for this lost time.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this, both of us as globetrotters, how the pandemic has really crimped our style. It forced me to change things. I felt like my whole brand was as this dude who's like all around the globe, and all of a sudden it's like, nope, you're stuck in one very small place, and had to kind of readjust the plan. And I feel like, you and I both did, I think we both managed to kind of try to, I don't want to say make the pandemic rewarding, but try to make lemonade out of the lemons,
Yeah, it's just refusing to get rolled over by it, and we've all been dealt this very crappy hand, and it's up to us to see what we can make of it.
Yeah. So just finally, what are, talk about like how you're evolving your work. Like, I mean, you started your new vlog. What are the kind of innovations or things that you're doing to kind of, just whatever, change it up with your work?
Well, it occurred to me that what we do is very rare. There are probably less than a handful of people who travel around the world chasing cyclones. We get some extremely interesting off the beaten path places, which are beautiful. We meet interesting people. We have fascinating and often crazy experiences. And I was thinking, well, this is why aren't I properly documenting this and bringing people along on the ride, like properly? I'm not just talking about Twitter updates and YouTube footage, storm footage on YouTube, but a properly well put together series for YouTube. Long gone are the days where we need production companies to kind of bankroll us to create cool content, or look at what you're doing now. You don't need a TV channel to do this. This is completely your own initiative, and you've got a limited number of audience available to us. So this was really inspiring. So yeah, I'm just going hell for leather now, trying to produce this. I see myself as a bit of a one-man band Discovery Channel. You got to think big and just see how it goes. But yeah, it's a long-term project. I want to work on this hard for 4 or 5 years. It'll take a while to get off, but yeah, just this cool vlog series. I want to make it look beautiful, get the drone in the air, some exciting storms and experiences, and to show everyone what it's like.
Yeah, no, and I'm really inspired by the initial episodes that you've done with Frontline Nature. I think they look beautiful. I think that, really a nice combination of shots and graphics and music. I think you are a one-man Discovery Channel, and I'm looking forward to seeing those episodes.
Thanks. I really appreciate your support, and from your viewers as well. It means a lot.
All right. Well, this has been awesome, man. Thank you for coming into the sort of virtual Hurricane house to have this conversation. I thought people would find it interesting because, you and I, what we talk about behind closed doors, we're doing it out in the open today.
No, I really appreciate it. And as I said, I love what you're doing with the live stream. And I just want to wish you a really successful and safe chase season.
Thanks, man. You too. And we will we'll see each other soon, either in North America or East Asia. It's going to happen hopefully soon.
I can't wait.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Take care, man.
See you.
Bye-bye. Well, that was awesome. Yeah, James and I are, we really are, we're buddies. We talk like every day, and it's just, I thought it would be fun to kind of bring some of that discussion, like I said, out in the open, especially for younger chasers who are wondering, what are the things on our mind? What do we talk about? All righty. So now on to what I call a blast from the past.
Forgotten chases.
Yeah, so forgotten chases. This is a part of the show where I'd like to talk about a chase that was very cool, but that no one ever talks about or asks about. As I said, my greatest chases: Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas, Super Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. It's like those are the ones that people always want to hear about again and again, but there's so many other cool and interesting chases, and that's what this segment of the show is for. And today, the spotlight, this forgotten chase, brings me to Mexico, and specifically the Pacific side of Mexico. Now, this is one of the interesting things about Mexico. You think about the United States, we get hurricanes on the East Coast, not on the West Coast, because the water off California is too cold. Okay. Mexico, it's not that way. Mexico, because most of it's in the tropics, they get hurricanes on both coasts, and the Pacific coast, the West Coast, actually gets a lot of action. And so I chase there a lot. So there's a bunch of reasons I like chasing on the west coast of Mexico. First of all, it's very active. It's probably, out of all the basins, the hurricane basins, it's the one that for me feels it's the most kind of hardwired climatologically. It's just like clockwork. It just cranks out one hurricane after another. What you see in that map there are all of the major hurricane landfalls since 1950 on that coast. And you can see there's quite a few. So that's one thing that makes it automatically appealing to me. Another thing is just there's a lot of rich history on these towns, kind of like Mississippi. A lot of these cities have cool histories, cool hurricane histories, which I really like. And the people are awesome. I love being in Mexico. I'm from LA. That part of California used to be part of Mexico. So there's a lot of cultural synergies between California and Mexico. And you feel those when you go across the border. Mexico in a lot of ways feels like it's a comfort zone. I feel very at home there, and I like it. And I really dig the people. They're really nice. So that makes it a great place to chase. And one other thing is that it's really close to home. My main home is in LA, which is just above Mexico. So these places, Cabo San Lucas, Puerto Vallarta, Manzanillo, these cities on the west coast of Mexico are all just like a 2-hour flight from LA. They're really close. So it's very accessible. Now, that said, there are challenges to chasing there. One is my big pet peeve about chasing in Mexico is that there's no radar. They have a national radar network, but it's not been working in recent years. One or two of the sites are working, but most of them aren't. So I've been on many Mexican chases where there's just no radar. Hurricane Patricia. Okay. My friend Eric and I, we penetrated a pinhole eye in the mountains of Jalisco using visible satellite imagery. We did not have radar to use. It's amazing that we got in that eye without radar. Hurricane Willa, which I also chased with Eric. That was another one where, chasing without that help. Hurricane Odile in Cabo San Lucas. That was another one I hunted down without radar. These were all successful chases, but they were hard. It's like being a tennis player and you're hitting a serve with a blindfold. So that's the one thing. My God, I wish at some point that they get the radar network back up there. That's the one thing. The second thing is the accessibility can become difficult. Parts of the west coast of Mexico are very rural. There might be sort of less infrastructure in certain areas. The roads maybe in some places aren't as good. It's very mountainous and rural, so that can make it hard. And then the third concern is security in some places. Our State Department has all kinds of travel warnings about the west coast of Mexico because of, criminal activity. That is a concern, but I also think it's important not to overstate the problem. While it is discussed, I have to say I've chased many, many times in Mexico. Mexico is my favorite country to chase in besides the US, and I consider myself a sort of specialist in Mexican hurricanes. And out of all the years I've been chasing there and all the hurricanes I've been in on both coasts, in big cities and small towns, I've not once experienced a crime or even aggressive behavior. Everyone's really nice all the time. I feel very safe. I feel very welcome. So I want to point that out. There is a concern about security, but personally, I have not ever experienced any kinds of issues. I've just only felt good vibes from the Mexicans. All right. So that's the turf. Now let's talk about the forgotten chase. Hurricane Jova of 2011. So that's a Spanish name. So you say the J like an H, Jova, not Jova, Jova. So there you can see it. That's at peak intensity when it was looking like pretty sexy off the coast there. So this was an Eastern Pacific storm. It was in October of 2011, and it was peak intensity. It was a strong Category 3, and it came ashore in the state of Jalisco. And it was the official intensity was Category 2, 85 knots, which is 100 miles an hour. So if I had to sum up Jova, I would say, like, if I had to capture Jova in a nutshell, I would say I would call it a hurricane that was ugly, but passionate. Yeah, that's a good way to describe Jova. So what am I talking about? So we'll take a look at it. Okay, first of all, here's the track of Jova. So notice it started as a depression and it moved sort of offshore parallel to Mexico. And then notice it kind of hooked back toward the coast and hit. That is a very common October track, okay, for Eastern Pacific hurricanes. All summer long, they just go straight out into the ocean. They just move straight west and they just die, okay? October, as the troughs start to come down from Canada, that just sort of scoops them up and recurves them, and they actually just kind of boomerang back into the coast. So interestingly, almost all of the interesting landfalls in the Eastern Pacific on the west coast of Mexico, not almost all of them, but a lot of them are in October. Most of the intense landfalls are in October. So that's kind of interesting. And Jova was another example. Not that it was that strong, but it was it took that kind of October style track. Okay, so here's what it looked like a couple of hours before landfall. And I remember as I was chasing it, just thinking like very, very uninspired by this satellite presentation. I was just like, wow, this thing is like lame. It just looks like complete garbage. I mean, I was just really like, wow. It was late at night. I looked at that satellite picture. I almost didn't leave the hotel. I was just like, like maybe this thing, like maybe I shouldn't even bother chasing it. I just wasn't into it. Okay. That was their infrared image. Now infrared's like it's like taking an Instagram selfie. Okay. But let's look at the microwave image, which is like taking an X-ray, and the microwave image shows a very different story. Here's the microwave image. Look at that. That's got a nice like donut thing going on there. Okay. You see that loop, that circle, that's a nice core. That's a pretty healthy microwave impression. And what that means is that even though it looked like crap on the infrared, there's like a really weird looking bug flying around the studio and it's like really distracting me. Okay. I'm going to ignore it. Focus. So even though it looked like kind of a mess on infrared, it actually still had some good structure. And what I didn't realize was that thing was going to hit me hard. So where did I go to chase it? I went to a little tiny town in Jalisco called Emiliano Zapata. Okay. And you can see there's the track as it came in, and there's where I was. Okay. I was right in a perfect position to get the eastern or the right eyewall, which was the bullseye for the maximum impact. And a fun fact is I would return to this same tiny village 4 years later for the cataclysmic Hurricane Patricia. And just to refresh your memories, Patricia is the strongest hurricane ever observed on the planet. Sustained winds of 215 miles an hour. And it came ashore at Emiliano Zapata. It weakened a little before it came ashore, came in as a strong 4. But right at Emiliano Zapata, Eric and I went through that pinhole eye right in this town. And it's where I was for Jova. So it was really kind of random just to be in this little town twice in a couple of years. Anyway, all right, there we go. So now let's take a look. I'm going to show you just a clip of the video of what it was like. I was in a garage as it started to hit. 2 things I want you to notice in the video. First is it starts, the wind is blowing one way, and then it just suddenly reverses and starts blowing the other way. It was really weird. And it wasn't because we were in a different part of the hurricane. It was just probably something with the nearby mountains, but it was really weird. But then notice how the wind builds until right before 1 a.m. It just really rips. I mean, I was surprised just given the satellite images. I was not expecting this thing to be as kind of intense and roary as it was. So let's take a look at that, and I'll bring you through Hurricane Jova. So yeah, so Hurricane Jova is a good example of how sometimes, you know, some violent and intense hurricanes, you know, not all of them win beauty contests. You know, it didn't look great on satellite imagery, but as you saw, that thing had some real teeth to it. And actually, another good example was the one that struck Mississippi this last October, Hurricane Zeta. You know, it hit Louisiana, and by the time it got to Mississippi, it really looked like a mess on the radar imagery. I mean, it just really kind of fell apart. But what was left of the eye wall absolutely blasted the Mississippi coast. And everyone I talked to from Bay St. Louis to Gulfport and Biloxi was like, whoa, that thing was strong. You know, and these are folks who've been through a lot of hurricanes. Didn't look good, but it was intense. And I've actually had the opposite happen. I've been in hurricanes that looked really beautiful, like perfect eye wall and everything else. And then you get in it and it just doesn't seem to have teeth. The point is, the way it looks does not always correspond with how it feels on the ground, which I find very interesting. Just never know with these things. Here's the pressure data that I collected in that right eye wall, 985 millibars. It never got in the eye with this one, just went through the eye wall. And that lowest pressure happened about 20 minutes before you saw those really crazy winds in this thing. And here's the damage. Here's what it looked like. This is actually outside of I was in that little sort of garage there, that carport. That's where I wrote it out. And there's that sign that you saw just kind of, you know, falling, that was sort of falling in front of the camera. That was that sign. But yeah, that was really kind of an edgy storm, and it surprised me very much. All right, now for a little bit of an attitude problem. As you guys know, we're up to my favorite part of the show.
Get over it.
Very opinionated, and in this part of the show, I will share an opinion that is probably unpopular, and I'll do it very aggressively and without apology. Yeah, this is definitely my favorite part of the show. I feel like I get to really cut loose. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about, I want to talk about a rare animal, one that I consider to be a mythical creature, okay? Something I don't ever expect to see in my lifetime, okay? Now, some guys, some chaser dudes, might get excited dreaming about this fool's errand, but not me. Any guesses what I might be talking about? Let me check the comments. Now, there's a slight delay, so I don't know if I can wait to hear what folks are talking about. But anyway, well, I'll just break it to you. Okay, what I'm talking about is a Hawaiian chase, a Hawaiian hurricane chase. To me, it's something that ain't gonna happen. All right. So why am I this way? Why do I have such attitude every time someone asks me about Hawaiian hurricanes? Well, here's the deal. Hurricanes can hit Hawaii, but it's crazy rare. Okay. Since 1900, there have been only 3 direct impacts in Hawaii. Dot in 1959, a category 1, Eva in 1982, a category 1, and then Iniki, which was a category 4. That was in 1992. Now you could see here's the whole island chain. And you could see how the 3 impacts were just in the outer islands near and around Kauai. So nothing on the other islands, which I find kind of interesting. But bottom line is, yeah, very, very few impacts. Now, that doesn't mean that the islands have not had any impacts from tropical cyclones. They've had some tropical storms. They've had hurricanes pass offshore. But in terms of actual direct impacts from hurricanes, 3 since the beginning of the 20th century. So there's that. Near misses are very common. I just thought I'd bring up tracks of hurricanes near and around Hawaii just since 2000. And you could see that, yeah, like some of them come close. And, you know, some of these names you might remember from like recent news. You could see down here, this is Elsa. It was yellow as a hurricane strength, and it was approaching the islands. Oh, there was all this news around it. And then as it got close to the islands, as expected, it just completely fell apart. The mid and low level centers were probably like 100 miles apart. The thing just became a sheared mess. It did actually bring some destructive winds, but yeah, it was no hurricane. And you remember Hurricane Lane? This was 2018. This was a category 5, and the news media again went nuts about this. It was never expected to hit Hawaii, and it didn't. There's another one, Anna. That was another one that the TV networks and weather Twitter went crazy about. And as usual, it didn't hit, nothing happened. It's funny. It's just like, I noticed that the news media, for some reason, they love to go nutty about the Hawaiian hurricane threat again and again. They eat it up. Weather Twitter loves to get into it. And like, I never do. Now, interestingly, twice I've been to Hawaii to cover these events. I was there for Anna and I was there for Lane, not because I wanted to chase. Both times it was because I was because I was in agreements with TV executives where I kind of had to cover the stories, but they were not chases. I didn't consider them chases. I consider them actually wastes of time. All right. Now that said, I do want to say that there was one event that stands out, which was Hurricane Iniki of 1992, and that thing was absolutely the real deal. That was a full-on Category 4 that just rammed into Kauai, and that was like a beast. And I'm showing you this cool photograph taken by Bruce Asato. This is one of my favorite all-time still images of a hurricane. It really captures the energy of a hurricane eye wall. I'm really into this photograph, and this is from Iniki, which was kind of interesting. But Iniki was a 100-year event at best. It was basically like a big fluke. But every weather weenie who's really into the idea of a Hawaiian hurricane always brings up Iniki, like it means that there will be another one. I mean, I'm sure at some point there might be, but who knows? I also want to talk about, if you go further back in time, there is evidence of another major hurricane in the Hawaiian Islands. Some modern researchers, they looked at old Hawaiian language newspapers and they reconstructed a track of a hurricane in 1871 that they think was probably a Cat 3. And I read the paper and it's well reasoned. Basically, Hawaii in the middle of the 19th century had a very the native population was very literate. They had newspapers that documented events in great detail, and just based on the descriptions of the tree damage and other stuff, the modern researchers were able to infer what were probably Cat 3 winds. And here's the track of it. It went right into the Big Island at probably Category 3 intensity. So there is. I don't want to deny that hurricanes hit Hawaii, but again, we're talking two major hurricanes basically over 2 centuries. So, but folks are really stuck on this idea of Hawaii being like a hurricane prone area. And I think it's because, it has first of all, Hawaii is the only American state that is actually in the tropics. Like Florida is not in the tropics. Like Hawaii is officially in the tropics. It looks kind of hurricaney. It's got the palm trees and stuff. I could see why people think it has a hurricaney vibe, but don't be fooled. The Hawaiian Islands are not welcoming to hurricanes for a few reasons. One is just the water temperatures around there. There's a weird temperature gradient. The environmental conditions around the islands are often very hostile to hurricanes. It's why they kind of fall apart. And then there's the terrain. The Hawaiian Islands, especially the big one, are it's like Taiwan or Hispaniola. Those mountain peaks do all kinds of weird things to hurricanes as they approach. And I think Isel was a good example of that. That doesn't mean something bad can't hit, but these factors tend to really hurt them. And I should say the terrain, there are ancient myths, native myths about how the islands are protected by the mountain peaks. And what's interesting is that there's like some meteorological explanation to that, which I find very interesting. Add to all that, the Hawaiian Islands are a real pain to get to. They're just very far away and they're very widely spaced. So we're talking about island roulette, which you guys know I'm not fond of. So the bottom line is I have absolutely zero plans to chase in Hawaii. Now, am I promising I'm never going to chase in Hawaii? No, maybe I will. I mean, I don't know. At some point, I guess like if all the computer models say that something's just going to, hit, Honolulu, yeah, maybe. But bottom line is, do I look at computer models of the Central Pacific during the season to see what might happen? Nope, I never look. If there's a really strong hurricane in the Eastern Pacific and it's heading west toward the Hawaiian Islands, do I look at the computer models to see what might be happening? Nope. I absolutely have zero interest in it. I would be more excited to go chase in the Canadian Maritimes where, yeah, it might be some ugly unraveling granny cane, but at least you'll get some action. Anyway, that's my feeling about Hawaiian hurricanes. And if you disagree with that or if that bothers you, all I could say is get over it. That said, I do want to make a disclaimer. Hurricanes can happen in Hawaii, and also other kinds of tropical storms can happen in Hawaii. They can cause damage. They can create dangers. They have created damages and dangers. People have died in Hawaii in hurricanes. So if you're on the Hawaiian Islands, just because I'm like sort of, dissing the Hawaiian Islands as a chase turf. Don't think that means that you'll never be in danger. Always, always, always take hurricane warnings and watches seriously, and take the threat seriously from tropical cyclones. Just because I'm not interested in chasing it doesn't mean that it can't hurt you. So that's an important thing that I wanted to say there. All righty. That is it for the kind of the created content for this show. I thought I would just open it up to questions now. I see a lot of commentary, and I apologize that I haven't been sort of checking the this sort of comments as we've been going. I need, actually, what I might start doing with this show is bringing in an assistant to kind of bring in maybe to kind of field the questions for me and help me field them. But now I could just do it myself. Cameron Thompson asked, didn't Olivia of 2018 hit Hawaii? No, there was not a direct hurricane impact in Hawaii. Oh yeah, I see Louis Avery answered that question. Yeah, there was no direct impact of Hawaii in 2018. Just looking at more questions here. Let me see. Okay, someone earlier asked if James's kids are bilingual. Yes, he's raising them bilingual. Actually, I interacted with his youngest son on via Zoom the other day, and he speaks good English, and he also speaks Japanese, of course, because he's going to school, obviously, in Japan. Okay, I'm looking again, just more questions here. Okay, someone's asking about Hurricane Man season 2. So they were working hard to make that happen, but the TV executives in London, Toronto, and New York cannot agree. So as of right now, there is no agreement for season 2. That said, I am negotiating with another media company about a different show that I would be starring in, and it would be one looking back at my greatest chases and me kind of bringing you through those experiences, sort of like a Forgotten Chases, but also with my greatest hits. I'm in negotiations now, and the only reason I'm not naming the company is I can't name it until I sign on the dotted line, but I'm hoping that'll be soon, and then I could talk about it more. I'm very excited about this series also because I would have a big creative role. I would actually be I would be working on the stories with the writers and the production team. Whereas Hurricane Man, I was the star of that show, but this is going to be hard to understand. I had very little creative input. I was the star of the show. They followed me around as I chased hurricanes, but I had absolutely no input in the stories and how they were told or anything else. That was up to the directors and the producers. There's a whole team creating that show, and my job was just to be in the show. On this new series, which I'm negotiating now, I would have a role in sort of, in creating it, which I'm very excited about. But Eleanor, thank you for asking about that. Pam said I should apply for Guinness World Records. Yeah, maybe I should. I do know that I've been in 55 hurricane strength or typhoon strength eye walls, and I know that no one else has been in that many. So definitely I'm the leader in terms of how many hurricanes I've penetrated right now. So I definitely would like that recognition. Maybe the Guinness Book of World Records will make a sort of a category for that. Bad Weather Freak wants to know, what are my thoughts on this season? I think I agree with basically the forecast that we've been hearing from the folks who specialize in seasonal forecasts, and what they've been saying is that we're in for another busy season, not as crazy as last year, but that it's going to be on the busy side. And as I said earlier in the show, it does look like the Gulf is kind of maybe where it's at again for this year. So I'm thinking we could have another busy Gulf season. It feels so slow right now. July's been kind of quiet after Elsa. And you look at the computer models, you go 10 days out, you go 2 weeks out, and it looks kind of like, wow, there's not a lot going on. But that's actually really normal. Think of 2017. 2017 was like Harvey, Category 4 hitting Texas. Then, Irma, Category 5 raking the Caribbean islands and then hitting Florida. And then Maria, the worst hurricane to hit Puerto Rico in almost a century. Okay, that year was, I remember, pretty dead up until late August. Harvey was near the end of August. And before then, it looked like the season was not going to be much of anything. And we all know 2017 was just like a legendary year. So it's hard to say, but I think we're in for another, like, a busy season. That's my feeling. Do I plan to chase in Puerto Rico if all things go right? Typhoon Tip NSR is asking that. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one of my greatest chases of my career was Maria in Puerto Rico. That's my best footage. My Maria video was my most viewed video on YouTube. And it's also a very beautiful island. So yeah, I would go back to Puerto Rico and chase again, absolutely. And because it's part of the United States, there's no issues with, right now, it's, as I was talking earlier, because of the pandemic, international traveling is a little more complicated, but Puerto Rico is not international traveling, even though it's far from the mainland US. It is a part of the US. And I'm just reading some questions here. Lois asks, how do I manage to leave the disaster zones? How do I manage to get out after really extreme events like Haiyan and Dorian? What are the logistics? Well, basically, this is going to be a very unsatisfactory answer. It's just you kind of improvise it. One thing I've had to do, as a chaser is just learn how to really become very zen when you're in a situation like a Haiyan or a Dorian. When you go after a category 5 or category 4 in a developing country and you're far from home, you have to go into it knowing that just accepting the fact that you don't know when you're going to get out and when you're going to get home. And just once you reach that point of acceptance, then you're just open to the experience and you just kind of go with it and you're happy when you get home, but you just try to accept that. So what I do, like with Dorian, for example, I knew it was going to be a bad hurricane. I didn't think it was going to be the strongest in the history of North America, but I knew it was going to be a bad hurricane. So I made sure to have supplies and everything else. And then after the hurricane, I was kind of like a self-sufficient unit for a few days. I lived in my car, which did not blow away. The car next to mine just blew away. Mine, for some reason, didn't. But I lived in that car. I had food and water and supplies, and I kept it really clean, and I just stayed really focused on, tried to be helpful to others. Since my car was working, I was able to do stuff like drive people to the medical clinic or to their homes to get stuff from the wreckage. And I just tried to be zen, and eventually I got out on a military chopper. But thing with those big storms is just, if you're stuck there, just try to be helpful and try to document the experience. All right, reading some more questions. C7 Weather says, how many storms do I think will form this year? I try to stay in my lane. Like I'm a great chaser, and that's what I do. I'm a really good chaser. If you want a guy who's going to hunt down the core of a hurricane, I'm your guy. Seasonal forecasting is actually it's its own specialty. It's something that, there are people who, like Dr. Phil Klotzbach, who they spend their whole life just doing that. And so I defer to specialists like that when it comes to seasonal forecasting. They say we're going to have an above average number of storms, an above average number of hurricanes, and above average number of major hurricanes. And I think that they're right. I don't have anything more exact to say beyond that. And I'm just looking at some more questions here. I'm sorry, I'm not able to get to all of them. Aaron Lowe wants to know, what was my worst hurricane chase? I'm not sure if you mean like what was the worst hurricane I was in, or what was like the worst in terms of like, okay, this is a total waste of time because it's a bust. But I assume you mean the former, meaning what was the worst hurricane I've been in. And without a doubt, for me, it was Hurricane Dorian. I was on Great Abaco Island in the Bahamas. It hit at maximum intensity, estimated sustained winds of 185 miles an hour, which tied it with the 1935 Labor Day hurricane in Florida as the strongest hurricane on record in North America. And I was in a little town called Marsh Harbor that just got destroyed by this hurricane. And it was from a human standpoint, absolutely horrible to behold. And from a meteorological standpoint, utterly awe-inspiring. I say it's probably my ultimate chase. I don't expect to top that. I think that was probably like the peak of my career. I don't expect to be in something that crazy again, but who knows? Riley wants to know, can I chase in a location like where Hurricane Iota hit last year? So Iota hit down in Nicaragua. Okay. So Nicaragua is an interesting place. I would like to chase in Nicaragua. My issue with Nicaragua is that there's not a lot of infrastructure. As you guys know, I'm all about getting in the eye wall. I've got to get into the core of the hurricane. If I don't get into the core of the hurricane, for me, it's just like a waste of time. Like I don't even want to do it. Like I'm not interested in chasing a hurricane and being in the outer rain bands. Either I want to get right into it or not waste the time. And the issue with Nicaragua, if you zoom in, go into Google Maps, pull up the satellite view and then zoom really close to the coast. And when you do that, what you're going to see is that there's just not a lot of roads along the east coast of Nicaragua. There's whole stretches where there's just nothing. The only way to get there would be, I don't know, a swamp boat or something. I don't know. So there is like one major town up there called Puerto Cabezas, and the two hurricanes last year, Iota and Eta, came close to Puerto Cabezas. I think they got in the eye wall for one of them, but it's a tough area to chase. And my whole thing is, if I'm going to chase, I want to chase. I want to be able to, drive and get into the storm. And the thing with Nicaragua is a lot of it looks like you can't. I haven't written off the idea. I would like to chase in Nicaragua, but it looks kind of complicated to me, or not complicated. It looks like it would be really hard to do. Greg Blake asks, would Waveland have gotten the lower pressure reading of Camille since the 904 millibars was located in Bay St. Louis? Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly why the analyzed landfall pressure for Camille is 900, because the 904 was at the eastern part of the eye. The analysts assumed that in the center of the eye in Waveland, it would have been a few millibars lower. So the official estimated landfall pressure for Camille is 900, because it's assumed that, it would have been a little lower in Waveland. Okay, and I'm just reading more questions here. I definitely need someone to help me with this. Bad Weather Freak asks, do I have a degree in meteorology? And the answer is no. I actually studied history in college, and that's what my degree is. That was my area of concentration. And I'm always, I talk a lot about this when I talk at speaking appearances. I like to be really open about the fact that I do not have a meteorology degree. I always say I'm a hunting dog. My contribution to meteorology is to go into dangerous situations and pull high quality data from dangerous, hard to reach places during storms. And that's been my contribution. So in hurricanes, like historic hurricanes like Patricia and Odile and Haiyan, the data that I collected inside the cores of those storms are some of the only data that exists from those storms. And those data have helped the scientists, like the folks at the National Hurricane Center, assess those storms after. So if you read the National Hurricane Center reports on the hurricanes that I've chased, particularly ones like Odile, Patricia, Willa, a lot of the ones in Mexico, you'll see that they cite my work a lot, because sometimes the data that I collect are the only data they have to work with. So that's my contribution to the field. So while I'm not a meteorologist or degreed in this area, I collect some damn good data. And I also participate I work on peer-reviewed papers. The defining paper on Patricia, which had a bunch of co-authors, I was one of the co-authors on that. I wrote the section about the landfall event. Everyone else on the paper was a PhD except for me, but I was included because of the data that I collected in that storm. So I like my role in the scientific community. I was always meant to be out in the field. I'm that kind of guy. But there you go. Alex Garcia. Alex, great to hear from you. Alex runs my favorite hurricane conference every year. It's the National Tropical Weather Conference every year on South Padre Island in Texas. And he wants me to compare my experiences of Hurricane Harvey and Michael. It's a great question. And I would say they felt fairly close to me in terms of intensity. Harvey was a Category 4. Michael was just barely a Category 5, but they were similar storms. Intensity wise, they felt similar to me. Michael was stronger, but just for whatever reason, they were kind of similar in that sense. They were both similar in terms of dimensions. They were both kind of fairly compact storms with really kind of tight eye walls. But they were both, those are two of the strongest hurricanes to hit the United States in a very long time. Louis Avery wants to know what was the difference between Patricia and Maria in Puerto Rico. So Patricia and Maria were very different hurricanes. They were opposites. So the intensity wise, officially, they were very similar. Patricia was estimated to be 150 miles an hour when it hit Mexico. Maria was estimated to be 155 miles an hour when it hit Puerto Rico. So the difference between the two hurricanes was size. Patricia was absolutely tiny. It was like basically a big tornado. It was one little tiny ring of craziness, and that was the whole hurricane. And it was a scary ring of craziness. I mean, at the height of the storm, during the worst 15 minutes of it, of Patricia, I was crammed in a bathroom with 8 other people under a mattress because that's how scary it got. Maria was a big, fat thing. It was it wasn't just strong, but it was a large hurricane with a double eye wall structure, and the outer eye wall was as strong as the inner one, and it was hours of really intense wind. So they were really different from that sense. Jason wants to know, Jason Cabrera wants to know, have I been in a hurricane as a child? Yeah, actually that's what sparked my interest. When I was a child, I grew up on Long Island, which is it's an island off the coast of New York. And I went through a couple of hurricanes as a kid, and one as a toddler, one as a teenager. And those really underlined my passion for hurricanes. Probably the best memory I have is Hurricane Gloria of 1985. I was a 15-year-old weather nerd. The eye passed right over my town. I was very excited about it as it approached. And I always tell this story. I was really excited. And it did some serious damage to our property. And I remember, my mom started to cry. And, that's the worst thing for a boy to see is, when you see your mom cry. And I felt really, really bad about having wished for the hurricane. And that started sort of a lifelong conflict, side of me. I don't wish for hurricanes now, but I'm obviously very passionate about this topic. I find the meteorological aspects awe-inspiring, but then there's a human misery. And it's like, how am I so enraptured by one and so upset by the other? And how do I reconcile these things? It's something that conflict started when I was 15, and it still happens. Someone's asking, can I do Hurricane Elsa? I don't understand the question. Elsa was a month ago, so no, I can't chase it now. Moises Abro says, I thought Patricia was 215. Yes, at peak intensity, Patricia was 215 miles an hour, but at landfall, it weakened a little bit. When it hit Mexico, it was 150 miles an hour and lost some strength. C7 Weather wants to know, what was my favorite typhoon chase? Well, in terms of what was the most meaningful chase, it would have to be Super Typhoon Haiyan, a category 5, just like an incredible storm. In terms of ones I felt very excited about as a chase, I would say probably Typhoon Goni, not the one that just hit Philippines last year, but one that hit Ishigaki Jima in the Ryukyu Islands in 2015. That was a very intense 3, almost a category 4. I played island roulette. I got just in the right spot. I was in a Ishigaki, a little city that got absolutely raked by the right eye wall. It was really intense. It was one of my best Pacific chases, and it was really good island roulette. Just looking at some more comments here. Riley wants to know, do I look at anything other than models when it comes to hurricanes, MJOs or Kelvin waves or anything else? I don't. And I'll tell you why, because whatever is happening with the MJO phase or the Kelvin waves, at the end of the day, I'll pay attention to the MJO. I'll be like, all right, maybe next week it's going to start to pick up again. But there's so little specificity with those things that they're not that useful. I might in the back of my mind say, okay, we're going into an MJO pulse where, okay, now I have to maybe sort of clear up my schedule a little bit, make sure, it's free, early in August or whatever. But now I stick with the operational models. I use the ensembles a little bit, but not so much. Pam wants to know what happened to the house that the tree hit across the street during Hurricane Zeta. So yeah, the house has been rebuilt. So during Hurricane Zeta, which hit Bay St. Louis, a giant pine fell and crushed the house across the street, like crushed it. When I got back this July, I noticed that they'd done a lot of work on it, and the house, I don't know if it's inhabited yet, but it's rebuilt and it looks really good. And I was really happy for them that they did that. Okay, let me see. Mark Palavos Rahotes wants to know, can anyone chase hurricanes? Just give me a quick answer. Well, the quick answer is yes, anyone can chase. It's a good question. I didn't go to school to chase hurricanes. I wasn't led into a special club to chase hurricanes. I didn't get a certification. I didn't take a course. The very first chase I went on was very simple. A hurricane was moving up the coast. It was Bob in 1991. It was moving up the East Coast. It was going to hit New England. And I just thought, wow, I want to be in that. And so I was too young to rent a car or anything. So I got in a train and took a train up the coast to New York. Then I took another train along the Connecticut coast to Rhode Island. But yeah, that was my first chase. Back then, this was before the internet. So I didn't know about storm chasing. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know people chased hurricanes. I didn't know there was a word for it. I just wanted to be in a hurricane. So I just went and did it. I didn't have a camera. I didn't have a barometer. I just wanted to be in it. There was no social media. So the point of that story is that I just wanted to be in the storm and I had an urge to be in it. And so I just put myself in the place to be in it. And that started this crazy career. So yeah, anyone can do it. There's no barriers to entry. I mean, obviously, you know, I shouldn't say that. Real life is a barrier to entry, you know, having a full-time job, having a family, you know, maybe living in a place that doesn't get hurricanes, you know, money is a factor as well. You know, it costs money to chase. I've managed to monetize it. I've managed to make a career out of it. I make money doing it by being on TV and stuff. But I guess I should dial back what I said. There are barriers, but the point is anyone can do it. And as I say to young chasers or people who want to be a chaser, you can design your life to be what you want it to be. And it's a matter of priorities. You know, it's important to me. You know, it was important to me. I always put my chasing first, and I decided to kind of design the rest of my life around it because I was so passionate about it. And if, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. You know, that doesn't mean that it's not hard to sometimes balance it with other things in life. But the point is, you know, I'm a big believer that you could design your life to follow your passions. Aaron Lowe asks a great question. If the 1926 Miami hurricane, which was a big category 4 that hit the city directly, if that were to happen now, would I actually chase it in downtown? That's a good question. I think I might, because I think that would be really interesting to observe it there. You know, a major hurricane impact in a big city like that. I think that would be very, very interesting. And, you know, a lot of downtown Miami's right on the water anyway, so you can really kind of get the full effects. Tavold wants to know, do I think Harvey was stronger than 115 knots? Maybe. You know, I always thought maybe it was a little stronger. I thought maybe they were going to bump it up a little in the post-season post-analysis. They didn't. But yeah, I often wondered if maybe they should have. Global weather updates. My friend Connor, who wants to know, do I think any of my chases will ever exceed Dorian, where I went through its eye when it was at peak intensity of 185 miles an hour? If I had to guess, I would say no. I think that was like my perfect chase. Who knows? I'll keep trying to, you know, have other perfect chases, but I think that one's going to be really, really hard to top, honestly. I don't know if that's going to be possible. C7 Weather wants to know, what's my limit for a hurricane? Would I say no to a 230 mile an hour system? The answer is no. I would not say no to any hurricane. When I was chasing Patricia with my friend Eric, operationally, it was estimated at 200 miles an hour. In postseason analysis, they bumped it up to 215. But while we were chasing it, we thought it was a 200 mile an hour hurricane, which was crazy, like seeing a wind speed that starts with a 2. And, you know, we were nervous, but we went for it. You know, I was nervous, but I also knew this thing was going to be historic. And if I got in it, I would get unbelievable data and unbelievable footage. And that passion to document such a crazy ass event like that passion outweighed my fear by just a little bit. So I kept going for it, but I was nervous during that one. Yeah. I was really nervous during Patricia. Yeah. Edwin says, hey, Edwin. Edwin's a good friend of mine. Edwin from Puerto Rico, Edwin F. Barbosa. Edwin says being in a major hurricane is an amazing experience, but the aftermath sometimes is like a punch in the face. Yeah, and Edwin, you would know. Edwin lives in Puerto Rico, so Edwin he's a young weather nerd. He's a student. He went through Maria, so he experienced a tremendous hurricane, and then he experienced that really tough aftermath in Puerto Rico. I mean, the folks in Puerto Rico suffered for a long time after Maria. You know, some places didn't have power up to a year after the storm, not to mention other things. So Edwin knows. I think Edwin, more than all of my friends, understands the excitement of being in a major hurricane and also the pain of sort of, you know, getting past the aftermath of it, which can be really hard. Thanks for some of these kind comments. Juan Pedro Mariano wants to know, have I ever encountered tornadoes in a hurricane? Believe it or not, I have not. I've been in so many hurricanes and I've never seen a tornado in a hurricane. I've been in mesovortices and other weird things inside the eye wall, but a real tornado with like a funnel, no. Interestingly, I've never seen it. Now, the thing with tornadoes and hurricanes is they generally happen on the outskirts. They happen on the outer parts of the hurricane, not so much in the inner parts. Lois wants to know, would I go up with the hurricane hunters if invited? The hurricane hunters are the folks who fly the planes into the hurricanes to collect data. I would do it. It's not my main focus. I'm always about experiencing it on the ground. For me, a hurricane is all about the experience on the ground. But yeah, it's something I'm interested in doing. I'm friends with some of the hurricane hunters, and once we get past the pandemic, I'm gonna probably try to arrange to do it. It's, you know, it's something that I would like to experience. But for me, the ultimate hurricane experience is always on the ground. PVC Pipe wants to know, have I ever seen lightning strike the ground in the eye wall of a hurricane? I haven't seen it strike the ground, but I've seen lightning in eye walls. Now, the whole thing of lightning in hurricanes is interesting. Generally, hurricanes don't have a lot of lightning, but sometimes they do. And Hurricane Willa in Mexico in 2018, that was one where the eye wall was there's a lot of lightning. I remember a lot of flashes in it, and they weren't transformer explosions. It was lightning. There's also a record. There was a tiny, very violent hurricane that hit downtown Miami in 1950. It was called Hurricane King. It was not only very violent, it was a Category 4, but it was one of the smallest hurricanes ever to hit the United States. It had a radius of maximum winds of maybe like 3 or 4 miles. It was tiny, and it hit downtown Miami head on in 1950. But anyway, one interesting thing about that hurricane is that there was brilliant and nonstop lightning in the eye wall as it hit the city. A lot of people noticed that. One interesting thing about King was that it was rapidly intensifying as it approached Miami. So it seems like a phenomenon that's maybe associated with strengthening hurricanes. Connor says I should get Picos Hank on one of these shows. I'm a fan of Picos Hank. I think he does really, really cool work. A lot of people have compared him and me. We've actually never met. We follow each other on social media, so I guess we're sort of like social media friendly, but we've never met. But I do think that he does really cool work. Sammy wants to know, what was the first hurricane I ever chased? It was Bob in 1991 in Rhode Island. Not the first hurricane I've been in, but the first that I actually went and chased. And as I mentioned earlier, I chased it in a train because I was too young to drive into it. It was kind of like a crazy one. Player wants to know, how did Laura's eye compare to Dorian's? They were very different. So Laura had the weirdest eye I've ever been in. Laura had what I call concentric eyes. So the outer part of Laura's eye was very windy. So the rain stopped. You could see some stars, but the wind was still blowing at hurricane force. It was really weird. Then when you got to the exact center of the eye, then it got really calm, like a traditional eye. Then it was like, really still. You could hear the crickets and the frogs. So there was like an outer eye that was very, very windy. And then there was an inner eye where that was calm. And what was interesting was the inner eye passed over Sulphur, Louisiana, but Lake Charles only got the outer eye. So my friends in Lake Charles said the winds never dropped below 100 miles an hour. They went through the eye, but it was really windy. Dorian had more of a classic, just a beautiful stadium eye with, calm conditions inside of it. It was less unusual. The only thing that made Dorian unusual was how crazy strong it was. Okay. So many questions. Thanks, folks. A lot of good ones today. Do I believe all the talk about government being able to control storms? Nope, I do not. I don't think the government can control hurricanes. I think they just happen. I think, humans can do a lot of amazing things, but we can't do everything. And hurricanes are going to do their own thing. And I don't believe any conspiracies about the weather. Riley wants to know, do my ears hurt in a hurricane depending on how low the pressure is, like Dorian when the pressure is in the low 900s? And Riley describes his experience in Sally. He says his ears hurt in Sally. So here's the deal. People think their ears hurt in a hurricane because the pressure's low. It's actually not that. It's because of the wind. So as the wind passes over and around a building, it creates crazy pressure fluctuations, just very short-term ones, okay? And those pressure fluctuations are actually what cause the damage to the building. It's why like a roof will lift off and stuff like that. But that's what's hurting your ear. It's not that the pressure is that low. When you're in an airplane, you're often in lower pressure than what's in like a strong hurricane. So the pressure is related to the changes in wind pressure. And in Dorian, my ears were killing me. Gusts over 200 miles an hour were hitting the little building I was in, and the folks I was with and I were all like, like we'd get these gusts and you could feel like the drum in your ear, just like you could feel it like pulsing in and out. It was like a scary, weird experience, and it hurt. So I think that's more what it is. Great question from SC75. What was the first hurricane I recorded on video? So that would be Hurricane Wilma in Florida in 2005. I'd gone on other chases before, but that was the first time I thought to film it. And actually that video is on my YouTube channel. You could see it. It's a grainy video because back then YouTube didn't allow high res uploads. But yeah, Wilma was the first one. And what was interesting was, this is going to sound crazy. It sounds crazy to me, but up until Wilma, it didn't occur to me to bring a camera. I wasn't trying to document it. I just wanted to be in it. When I chased Hurricane Brett in Texas in 1999, I had no camera, no barometer, no nothing. I just wanted to be in it. I just wanted to feel it. The idea of documenting it or telling a story around it did not even occur to me. So now I can't believe I ever thought that way. Of course, I would want to document these experiences. But yeah, Wilma was when I first started doing it. And I remember coming back home from Wilma and looking at the footage and being like, wow, I'm so glad I shot this footage because I was really into it. And that's when I started really, realizing the importance of documenting these events. And then I started collecting air pressure data. I started collecting data in hurricanes in the 2010s, not before. For years before that, I wasn't collecting data. I just wanted to just film them. John, the gamer boy, wants to know, did I chase Katrina? I did not. So there were a few years in the early 2000s. I was living in Europe for a while. I'm a businessman. I have some other things on the side. And back in the early and mid 2000s, I was living in Prague in the Czech Republic, which is formerly Czechoslovakia. I was living in Prague, and I was just, living and working there in Europe for a few years. And at that time, I was very disconnected. The early 2000s, I was very disconnected from my chaser dude self. I was just, I was a businessman living in Europe. And then I came out of that. I came out of that retirement in 2005. Wilma was the first hurricane I'd chased in years. And I found it so invigorating that I promised myself I was never going to stop chasing again, that I was going to prioritize it from that point on. But I missed Katrina and all the other 2005 storms. Would I chase a 70-mile-an-hour system, or am I strictly hurricane? I'm strictly hurricanes. Now, that doesn't mean I won't chase a hurricane and it might surprise me at the end and drop below 70 miles an hour. But my thing is, if it's not a hurricane, I'm not interested. And I know a tropical storm can dump 100 inches of rain and all that, but that's not my thing. I'm a wind guy. Like I think of Hurricane Harvey. The part of Harvey that really interested me was when it came ashore as a Category 4, in the central Texas coast. That's the part that I was really interested in. The part that made the news and that became the big disaster was the flooding in Houston. But I'm not it didn't interest me at all. I'm not a disaster chaser. I'm not like looking to see human misery. I'm really all about like the wind. I didn't want to see a giant rainstorm. So I just actually, as soon as I got out of Rockport, which is where I rode it out as a Cat 4, I just got back to San Antonio, got on a plane and got back to LA. I had no interest in documenting the flooding in Houston. I'm all about the wind, man. And, you know, that's me. There are other folks who are really interested in like freshwater flooding. I'm not one of those guys. I did not chase Sandy. Sandy's kind of not my kind of system. Although I grew up in the Northeast, I'm kind of a snob now. I like the stuff in the Gulf in Florida, like the stuff that's further south, that cyclones with tight cores, you know what I mean? And as stuff starts to get further north, it starts to have less structure. It's like less interesting to me. The Gaelic Gladiator wants to know if I've ever thought about tornado chasing. Not really. No. I mean, would I like to see a tornado? Sure. Do I ever watch tornado videos on YouTube? Yeah, sometimes. Occasionally I'll see a tornado video and be like, wow, that is really cool, because it's wind and I like wind. But I'm a big believer in specialization. And for me, what I want to be is the top hurricane dude in the world. And hurricanes are my passion. They're what I know. They're what I live and breathe. So my focus is hurricanes. And also, you know, the guys who are more well-rounded chasers than I, the guys that chase hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, floods, fires even. Okay. Some of my friends do that. They're very well-rounded guys. I call them weather whores. No, but I mean that in an affectionate way. They're guys who are very versatile, and women too. I'm sorry, I shouldn't keep saying guys. More and more women are storm chasing, which is great. You know, it's nice to see a little more diversity in the scene. Folks who chase everything, they don't have an off season. There's no time of year for recharging. And I like the way that there's a rhythm to the hurricane season. There's a period of the year when you're just going. And then there's a period of the year where you're kind of in hibernation. And I like that rhythm. Now, when the pandemic is over, I'm going to go back to chasing in the Southern Hemisphere. I've chased in Australia before. I would like to again. And then, of course, you have the year becomes kind of like a camel hump. You've got two peak seasons. You've got the peak season in the Northern Hemisphere, and then you get the peak season in the Southern Hemisphere, which is the opposite side of the year. I would be cool with that, but it's very important to me to have a rhythm to the year and to have a part of the year that's what I call the off season. And just focusing only on tropical cyclones gives me that. And like I said, I'm a big believer in expertise. Tucker Allen says, iCyclone, I just want to say you inspire me, and I'm going to chase when I grow up. Tucker, thank you so much. It means so much to me to inspire people. Like, it really means a lot to me. That comment made my day. So thank you. I just want to say, please, please, please be careful. You know, that like I'm excited to inspire young people, but I also, I lose sleep over, you know, the idea of a young person, you know, copying me or doing what I do and then, you know, getting hurt or killed. So you must always put safety first. You know, I'm around. I've been doing this 30 years. 30 years I've been on the road chasing storms, and I'm still here. You know, and part of it's luck, but part of it's that I've you know, I'm a daredevil to a point. I've also made decisions so that I don't die, and always put your safety first. Yeah, Michelle Payne, she says, that's like Reed Timmer. He goes everywhere. Yeah, Reed is a good friend of mine, and I love Reed's work. And Reed, man, he's the most versatile guy I know. You know, he chases everything, and he has expertise in everything. You know, he's really good at what he does. Reed is also, unlike me, as I said, I'm not a meteorologist. Reed is not only a meteorologist, he's a PhD. So he's like a really smart meteorologist. You know, Reed is like the complete package. I'm a big admirer of his work. And I think he's a good hurricane chaser when he chases hurricanes. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll take one or two more. Aaron Lowe asks, what was the thing that made me get media attention as a storm chaser? Well, that's a great question. So up until the 2000 teens, I never wanted to be on TV. It didn't even occur to me to be on TV. Didn't even pay attention to that. Then Super Typhoon Haiyan happened. My friend James, you saw that shot of me rescuing people in the storm surge. So James shot that footage of me rescuing people during Super Typhoon Haiyan. That footage went totally viral. It was like on every news station everywhere. And it just, you know, everyone saw me rescuing people, and CBS News hunted me down to come on and tell them about my experiences. And that was when I started doing TV. I went into the CBS studio in LA to like tell my story. And that was the first time I kind of performed in front of a camera, in the sense of having to like tell my story. And I like doing it. I like sharing what happened. And that was when I realized, you know what, I want to add TV to this because I want to tell the story, it felt good to do that. It felt cathartic, especially after that experience, which was really horrible. It was a horrible experience, and it felt really good to talk about it, to talk about it to an audience. So yeah, so that was the first one. It was Super Typhoon Haiyan, and that started my TV career. All right, I'll take 2 more questions. Global weather updates. Connor wants to know, do I have other planned guests to appear on the future? There will be other guests, but it's not going to be every episode. It'll just be some. Like I said, I don't want to be weather Oprah. Like that's not my plan. I don't want it to be a talk show, but I wanted to have James on because he's like, he's like my bestie in the weather world. Michelle says, when I disappeared for days after that storm, we were worried. That was Cat 5. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I did not mean to make people worried. Ethan Harry Do wants to know, if the Labor Day hurricane happened in 2021, would I chase it? It's a great question. Labor Day hurricane was as strong as Dorian, but it struck the Florida Keys. So the question is, would I want to be on those little tiny islands during something that strong? I think I would, actually. All right. I think I'm going to wrap it up with that. Oh, one last question. Tavold wants to know, can you put up a list of pressure gradients that I've recorded? Actually, I posted that list before. I could post it again on Twitter tonight so you could see it. But yeah, I like to post my gradients. All right. I did not expect to go that long. This went way long. I did not mean to do that. I'm sorry if some of you, well, you could have just shut it off at any time. But I want to thank all of you. This was totally, totally awesome. To connect with you guys again like this. I love this, being able to kind of, just have a real conversation the way we are now, not just Twitter. So yeah. So we're just about to enter the peak of the 2021 hurricane season. It's like the feeling of getting on a roller coaster, as we enter August. And my feeling about it is, yeah, let's do this. So thank you again. The next episode of iCyclone Live will be in August. It'll be, it's a monthly thing. And in the meantime, if you want to follow me on social media, that's where you could find me. And with that, I am signing out. Thank you all again. You've been an awesome audience, and you made this a lot of fun. Thank you. And I'll see you guys very soon.